GX Group, and Mr. Sandeep Sehgal, Head Enterprise Business, Nokia Enterprise. Without taking much of time, I hand over to our moderator, Mr. Bharat Bhargav, to kindly proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Uh, it's a great privilege to moderate a discussion with such a distinguished panel. So thank you very much for having me. I don't think any conversation is complete these days without discussing both the impact COVID has had and its implications on the industry going forward. Clearly, COVID has posed many challenges to our industry. Having said that, the operators and other players in the value chain, at least I believe, have done a remarkable job servicing our customers and catering to the changing customer needs. For the benefit of the audience, I'll share some of the issues faced by our industry and then request our esteemed panelists to tell us how they're dealing with it and what they expect from the regulator, the DOT, and the industry in general going forward. As they say, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. So let me start with the network, which perhaps has been the most stressed asset at an operator, and then I'll move on to some of the other issues and then request the panelists for their comments. So if we look at the operator networks, there's been a significant increase in traffic, largely video, but also voice traffic. And this has been due to broadly three things. One is video conferencing, so work from home, prolonged use of OTT entertainment apps, and the use of HD content. Obviously, voice traffic has also increased. So today, and I was looking at the numbers a few days ago, the data consumption has increased to anywhere between 12 to 15 GB per user per month. Voice minutes have gone as high as 960 minutes per user per month. What has also happened is that there is a geographic redistribution of traffic. So from business districts to homes. Also, as some my operator colleagues will tell you, the M curve that we look at or we speak about in the industry, I think now has more peaks than troughs. So, in the initial phases, when there was a complete lockdown, I remember there were some issues relating to O&M and restricted access to sites where there was complete lockdown. And those things have changed. Now, this begs the question, do we need to have a more heterogeneous approach to networks combining mobile broadband, fixed broadband or FTTX, and perhaps public Wi-Fi, and including other players like LCOs in the mix? And then, of course, there's always this question about what do we do about more spectrum? Do we need it? Do we need new technologies like 5G? But I think in the current context, we can perhaps look at the first three issues and try and address 5G to a limited extent. I know in many countries it's been deferred, the auctions have been deferred, etc. We can touch upon it. Then on the sales and distribution side of an operator, when there was a lockdown, we saw reduction in activations. We also saw reduction in physical recharges, and operators came out with, I'd say, very interesting P2P recharge solutions. So clearly, there's been innovation. Then on the fixed broadband side, we saw demand fulfillment challenges. So sometimes it had to do with subscribers or customers not allowing people to come in. Sometimes it was, the demand couldn't be fulfilled from the various ISPs. Then there were cases of collection issues, reduction in postpaid collections, and there were revenues like international roaming, which largely disappeared. If I move on to customer service, clearly closure of stores played a role, limited call center operations had its role to play, which then again leads to two questions. One, are we doing enough for self-service? Should we have things like cognitive chatbots? Do we need to rethink about our store strategy, redesign our stores? I'm sure these issues will be addressed when we move ahead. Then some of the ISPs and operators that we were speaking with also mentioned that there were problems because of supply chain disruption, which impacted network inventory, CPEs, physical recharges. So these were some issues, but coming to another...
different use cases which are very focused on the Indian requirement before we move to the 5G. Second is incremental advantage from moving from 4G to 5G. That is a very important area which is also relating to the commercials of different telecom service providers. What I can do or what I can provide using 4G services versus what I am going to provide using 5G services. What are the incremental costs and what are the returns on investment? These becomes very, very important. Since large number of BTSs has to be installed if we move on the 5G, so one has to be very clear that what are the different use cases you are having, what are the rate of return you are going to have on that before one actually moves on for employment of the 5G. Therefore, it may not be spread across all the regions, but it may be focused to certain areas or isolated places and slowly spread across rather than being taken at one moment. So it will be more of the overlay network than the greenfield operations. Then readiness of support infrastructure, as I have told you that we have only 25% of the fiberized BTSs. If we had to go for 5G, we have to have more of the optical fiber, more of the V-band, E-band links where we can provide a good quality of connectivity backhaul so that we can actually gain the advantages of the 5G network if it is rolled out. Network readiness has to be developed. For that, perhaps only telecom service provider may not be able to fiberize the whole country at the fast pace. So there is a need to have more IP providers who can concentrate in fiberization of the country, who can create more infrastructure, and there should be a very clear-cut policy as to how to share these networks with the telecom service providers and others. The success of 5G will not only depend on telecom service provider, but it will also depend on device manufacturers, app developers, system integrators, and many various other stakeholders. Therefore, all has to work in sync with each other so that the real advantage of 5G can be achieved. Just touching on the present states, TRAI has already identified spectrum and has given the reserve price for its auction. This has been accepted by Department of Communication and things are going on. DoT has already permitted test beds to test the use cases for India specific applications. DoT is also making available certain select bands for spectrum so that we can do the trial test. TRAI has conducted a workshop to bring all the stakeholders about 8 months back on same platform, and I am quite happy that these things are going very well and a lot of use cases are being discussed as of now. So I see that things are on the right track. 5G will be implemented in India. However, commercials and network readiness may take certain time, so it will be first as an overlay network rather than being all across, spread across the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. I know people will have a lot of questions, surely I do. But before we move on, I think I'll request Ms. Kumar to share her views.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So here are some examples of the applications of tech and how it is disrupting various domains. So you look at the design, and then I don't know if the last picture is there is construction, right? So you do a design in a virtual world. You don't draw it on paper. You don't do mock-up models anymore. You just do it in a computer-aided way, and then you throw over this design to a 3D machine, which they're actually constructing buildings with 3D printers nowadays, and a lot of other things. Look at healthcare. I mean, we're talking about telesurgery, we're talking about contactless healthcare. All of our hospitals suddenly are offering consultation through telemedicine. And obviously all the automation in the factories. Now that we want to have 25% workforce in the factory floor, you need to go in for a lot more robots out there. The transport, maybe the transport problem has been eased by people staying at home. So maybe the emphasis on intelligent transport may see a different twist, and we don't know what. Maybe people are going to just stop buying cars or will get rid of their cars, and the traffic will go down. But drones are permeating all aspects of life, whether it's supply chain or healthcare or agriculture. So they are playing an amazing role. So here let's just recap. So the way we live, work, play, or even go to war is changing and very much driven by technology. So health tech is talking about zero touch. FinTech and edutech is talking about doing it from home, whether it's your financial transactions, and I think enough examples were given. Education from home. Even the small kids today their parents are getting all this homework on their cell phones, and then the kids are doing that work at home. Agriculture, the emphasis is on agriculture becoming high value, using technology, so that the farmers can extract more value out of their resources. And then smart cities and villages, social distancing and contact tracing is becoming important in the communities in which we live. Again, technology has a role to play. And industry, I've already talked about the 25% of workforce. And finally, yes, we do have the example of people going back in time and war happening with stones and sticks. But I think there is a totally different model of warfare also happening in parallel. The stones and sticks is let's not talk too much about it. Okay. Now, let's, given that we are from the telecom world, let's step back and see. We did cause one disruption with technology, right? With telecom in the last few years, or I would say about a decade or so, and that has really changed things drastically in India. So how did we make that happen? So this is the slide I have, which shows the telecom revolution, the phase one of telecom revolution, way back in the mid-90s. We have where we were importing telecom infrastructure equipment at $1,000 per line cost. We were with great difficulty able to bring in 8 million subscribers with 3 to 6 million on a waiting list, right? And then we made our own telephone exchange, which the C-Dot exchange, which brought down the per line cost to $40 per line. And brought in some other innovations like the STD booths, and then we had 500 million subscribers and 11 million mobile. Now, then the third phase of this has been the mobile, which we were able to bring in telecom infrastructure for $15 per line, and we were able to create feature phones for 1,000 rupees per cell phone, and wireless removed the last mile problem. And we created this revolution where we have over 1 billion subscribers. So let's dwell over this a little bit more, going into the data revolution that has happened. Okay, so I think the phase one revolution tells us that we need to think differently about India, and the data revolution shows us how much differently we need to think. So as we introduce data, right, 2G, 3G, you can see the proliferation. I call this the hockey stick. So initially it comes in, we start embracing this new technology, importing a lot of it from other countries, started deploying it in India. Slowly we figure out how it, and then there is an exponential growth in demand and utilization of that, which and unprecedented. And same thing has happened with 4G. 4G started as a, Reliance Jio was probably just experimenting, and then the way it took over in a matter of months, it was just amazing, right? So there is this latent need, the latent demand in this country is huge for new technology. It just takes us a long time to get it right. We need to start doing this differently. We need to invert this lying down hockey stick into a standing up hockey stick. As new emerging technologies happen, we need to be at the forefront and deploy it in this country in a way that makes sense in this country, so that we have a standing up hockey stick in the deployment of new technology. So the 5G triangle, which I think Mr. Gupta did a very good job of explaining all the three use cases and all the other usage scenarios in the middle of the triangle. So what does it really mean, right? And how do we use this platform to build all the solutions that we need for this new world, or this new life, or new normal, as they say? So if you look at EMBB, MMTC, machine type communication, and ultra reliable and low latency, they represent different points of this triangle. EMBB represents 100 megabit per second. Machine type communication represents 1 million subscribers per square kilometer. Ultra reliable low latency represents 1 millisecond latency and maybe 7 nines, 5 nines, or 6 nines, and that level of reliability. So depending on the application, whether you're trying to build a smart city with IoT deployments, or you're trying to do ultra high, AR, VR type of ultra high resolution applications, right? Or you're trying to do very reliable requirement in intelligent transport, you need to position it on different points of the triangle and define the parameters and build the solutions accordingly. Because if you're going to have for everybody 100 Mbps, 1 million devices, and 1 millisecond, the cost will be phenomenal. So you have to engineer the future application by application, vertical by vertical. So now let's drill back on what needs to change. So how do we need to do this, deal with this paradigm shift and this opportunity that's looming in front of us? A fundamental change that needs to happen is that from being a consumer of technology, which we have always been, we have been predominantly a consumer of technology which has already matured. So all we know is to drive output of peace. We think of technology in the form of 10 years. That's not how you embrace new technology. That's not how you make the hockey stick into a standing up hockey stick. The way to do it is collaboration and hardening of technology before acquisition. We don't just in acquisition mode first. And how do we do that? It's by emphasizing on use cases, demonstrations of technology, doing proof of concepts, building the requirements leading to standards, and before standards, interops, trials, pilots. This is where the emphasis needs to be. This needs to be the paradigm shift in how we think about technology, how we think about acquisition of technology. So unless we get into this mode of thinking, unless we do this paradigm shift, this change, this opportunity will come and go, and we will still stay in the dark ages. Okay. So another fundamental thing to embrace new technology is it's about collaboration. It's about bringing the government, industry, and academia on a common platform, right? To influence the direction of technology, to enable the generational leapfrog, and embrace emerging technology. So that's the need of the hour, and we at TSDSI are providing that platform. And as representing the standardization community, I would say that standards is that collaboration piece in co-opetition, as they say. And the key tool that we use is consensus building, how to come together and align and drive consensus. So I invite you to join us in this journey, and we would like to help all of you to lead this emerging opportunity that is there in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. That was extremely insightful. Can I now request Balaji to please share his views and comments?
Thank you very much, Bharat. I guess my job is really easy now that we had such wonderful speakers, Mr. Gupta and Pamela, prior to me. I guess I'll just share a few points and then maybe leave it for more Q&A later. Essentially, the pandemic got us moving very rapidly to a new normal. And as has been spoken by Mr. Gupta and Pamela, the role of technology will be even more visible in the times to come, as almost everything that potentially can become contactless will get there. Whether it's work from home, whether it's virtual education, whether it's telemedicine, whether it's e-commerce or digital entertainment. There's a huge change coming. And the good part is, whether it's the operators that did a fantastic job during this time to keep the networks, managed when the traffic had gone up significantly on both data and voice. And when the whole paradigm of connect from work versus connect from home became the new norm, has been handled very well. And the entire ecosystem of technology providers, the IP1 providers who take care of the towers and the fiber and maintaining the networks, and our network heroes that we call them in the telecom services world, have done a fantastic job to make things and magic happen. I would just want to say a couple of things more. Number one is that as operators, we have made huge investments already in making our networks 5G ready. If I were to just take the case of Vodafone Idea, the amount of investment that we made, probably the largest in the world, on massive MIMO as a technology, new ways of using spectrum more flexibly, like dynamic spectrum recharging, have made recycling, and we made sure that by using some of these things, we are already getting to 4.8, 4.9 kind of speeds when it comes to the access part of it. However, access is just one piece of it. I'll come to that in a minute. On the core side, where it's network virtualization, or by deploying cloud as the means to connect with customers and also for our customer operations, we've done what it requires. We've taken for a smooth migration to 5G. And of course, the work that's happening on the Open RAN with the support of the vendor community is again helping in that direction. So all of these are ensuring that the networks, which are the telecom networks, go on to become the highways of the future for bringing inclusive and socio-economic growth. I guess the area that still a lot of work has to be done, and that's something that Mr. Gupta talked about, was on the fiberization of the whole network. So if we need to get to about 70, 80, 85% of fiber to the towers, then clearly there's a lot of facilitation that's required at both the state and the local administration level, because the central government has made its policy, but unless it is actually deployed in a meaningful manner, the huge capex that needs to be put into the networks, including the fiberization, will not happen fast enough. It will happen, but it's about, can we do it in 24 months, or are we going to take 60 months? So that's the kind of difference between executing quickly through a collaborative mode or otherwise. The other point I think was talked about in terms of the use cases. The amount of knowledge base that is there in the ecosystem as a whole is pretty high, from global experiences and also Indian experiences. Now, whether it's through using the vibrant startup ecosystem that exists in India and the industries verticals that are themselves kind of taking to digitization in a very, very big manner, we will get there in the coming 6 to 8 quarters. The fact that trials have been allowed by the government and the regulator is really, really good. The fact that even a hackathon that's conducted by the operator association has got 1,200 to 1,300 applications already of phenomenal nature, all of them specifically to solve commercial and social problems in an Indian context, I would think are very, very positive steps that make me very optimistic that we will make together the right movement towards 5G. I guess there are issues that everybody is aware. The regulator is supporting the best way possible. The government is aware of it. Whether it's the fact that there are some financial stress in the sector, that's well understood. The need to kind of execute on the NDCP 2018 in order to make sure that the costs in terms of levies and duties can come down, that ROW is made available at notional prices, that the price levels need to go up, and everyone acknowledge in the industry that it is time for us to have the right level of prices so that we have a robust and sustainable industry structure. The structure is good. We have 4 operators, 3 private and 1 government. But then you have the right price level. You create the investable surpluses required to make the investments the digital highway, and then second is to kind of catalyze the entire innovation cycle that is required, because while the movement to 2G, 3G, 4G required a lot of innovation, but what is coming our way with 5G is going to be exponentially even more innovation than has been done before, and that requires a lot of work, a lot of collaboration. So optimistic for the future. Roadblocks at the moment, I'm sure with the support of the regulator and the government, we should be able to overcome. Back to you, Bharat.
Thanks very much, Balaji. I think there will be a lot of questions coming your way, so we'll wait for that to happen. For now, if I can request Mr. Prajapati to share his comments and his views. Mr. Prajapati, I think you're on mute.
Yes. Hello? Yes.
We can hear you now.
Yes. Thanks, Bharat. Yes, it's a privilege to be here. Thanks, everybody. And a lot of topic has been covered, and it's a quite hot topic globally. And this is a major discussion going on in all different forums, especially when it comes to digital connectivity and what kind of impact it has on the social, economic, and also social environment. And looking a little bit back into the history, we have seen how this has changed our way of interacting and also our way of living, especially with the COVID effect. But even before COVID, we have countries which has been digital major and already been enabled to live this life of standard. So there are countries where social distancing has been part of the living standard due to the availability of technology. And we as human has always been adapted to that, but it has also made us change of how we learn, how we work, how we socialize. But if we look at digital society, it's more important to look into information society, which is very much linked to the advancement of digital information and communication technologies. But if we turn it around and look at what does it really mean for the citizen, the information society has got many opportunities, and it's also made us connect to a wider social group, enabling access to information sources, engaging online activities, social, political, educational. And one important thing is that it's left up to us to control the things. It's been easier now being connected to create your own entrepreneur business, setting up an online business. You don't need that level of capital. You have a global market available. And then above that, you're also opening up about this freedom, free to communicate, free to express yourself, which is an extremely important factor. And that also comes in with the political openness. Looking, what do we need with this? What is happening in the country itself? Communication is vital. India has done an extremely good job creating the bandwidth availability for many citizens, especially with the 4G and data rate dropping in the market. And currently India has the lowest per megabit rate globally. And that has enabled people to get connected, because digital society is also enabling everybody to have the facility to get connected. Because there are a lot of global forums discussing about how it's a human right to get connected to the information, and getting information available is becoming like a necessity, like water or electricity, that you have the information available being a citizen of a country. And looking at the connectivity, yes, mobile connectivity has been blowing up, which means also bandwidth has been reached out, but we are far behind. There are a lot of work needs to be done. We, from a company at GS, we are providing FTTH equipment, which means fiber to the home. And that we've seen that globally there's a huge demand, but there is a lack of connectivity in India. We are talking about 8 to 9% of percentage of connected homes, where we compare to any other regions, example Europe, where we have 67% connected home. It is due to the policies, government policies, and also how they promote the things, preparing yourself for this kind of situation where you have pandemics, where people will need to be having communication, doing things remotely more. And same thing we've seen in China also, a country just cross border of us, 47% connection rate. And that's more from pushing the digital society. And it's not just a trend, this is something that was expected. And this is a growth that we need to adapt. And that with that adaptation, you get a major population who can adapt to this demand. The data is blowing up also. That means, as they mentioned before, also SLA is extremely important. We have already now 50% annually growth of data bandwidth requirements. We are living in a country like India where e-commerce is the fastest growing globally, which means connectivity and also having reach and availability of network is also important. But with bandwidth, of course, you have limitation. 4G is going into limitation. We've seen the fixed network had a standard in the past couple of years, 0.5 Mbps per second. Now we're seeing people in average is accepting 10 to 12 Mbps per second. So it's becoming a higher standard. And that is also only increasing with the bandwidth demand. So 4G, obviously, that will not fulfill that gap. And moving in further, we are going into not only a digital society, we are going into a gigabit society. That means bandwidth will be driving the society forward. The more we move around, the more we do things, it's becoming bandwidth related. And we see now 5G, yes, there's a lot of discussion about 5G, there are a lot of topics about 5G. How will 5G impact India, or how will 5G impact generally or globally? Of course, India has a different view, consumers are different, but it has a global standardization that it's not actually going into the consumer level. It's more, as before discussed by some panel discussions, so it's about getting devices connected at the first primary level. Because we are talking about low latency, which means communication between devices needs to be accurate, on spot. And that's more important to machine devices. And some countries like Germany, Sweden, and part of the European well-developed countries are looking into self-driving cars. And actually you can already buy a self-driving cars and drive in certain roads. And it's working. And it's due to 5G enabled services. And the latencies comes into those pictures. But when it comes to the bandwidth requirements, the generic communication, work from home facility, there is still a lack of fixed broadband connection, because almost 90% of the communication, bandwidth communication, will go via fixed line. And then 10% in average will be the wireless communication with the bandwidth growing. Currently, that's different right now in India, because most of the data communication is gone via 4G because of the rates and availability. And now when COVID has put a lot of people into a different position, people have been aware that that needs to change. We need to adapt to the environment. We need to have facility available, along with the education and tapping over the facility to work from home. And also the entrepreneur mindsetting, where we have seen India has been extremely strong on small entrepreneurs, majorly on small shops coming up with innovation. And that's with the matureness of the consumer, the people, that will create a complete new entrepreneur thinking, be opening up, enabling the country to be more innovative online, especially when it's online services where you don't need so much cash availability, because innovation mind there's a lot of available, and that's clear. We have seen that trend. I'm based in Sweden, a small country, it's 10 million people, but it's still one of the most innovative country when it comes to online innovations. And the reason is not that people are much smarter, people have space for it. It's more that it has enabled the people to use their mind in a different way. Already in 2000, the government put policies that you get a laptop, you get a broadband connection funded from government taxation. That at that stage enabled a generation to be computer adaptive. And today we're seeing that generation is innovating, and they developing Skype, use Spotify, a lot of online application. The top 10 billion companies, online billion companies, are innovated from a country, small country with 10 million people. And sometimes you think, oh, they are more advanced, they are one step ahead. It's more about when did you enable the people to get connected? Because with the connectivity, a lot of innovation comes along. And that's where we will see now, enabling a country like India in a massive scale, the innovation will come and it will blow. Already now we see the e-commerce is taking such a high phase and already the fastest growing, and it means a lot of new innovation are coming with connectivity. But also important, SLA. This SLA is extremely important thing, availability and reachability to all the areas, and it needs to be a stabilization. A lot of discussion has been there, what kind of policies needs to make, what kind of regulation needs to be done for how to deploy different type of networks. Difficult to say because every country has a different environment, different culture, different competence available in the field, and it's no standard globalization can put a recommendation on that. It's more in phases. How can you get people connected in phases and then work on stabilization? And we have been working in India for the last 6 years. We have seen how the things has changed. Team has been how support level and how the deployment has been much more mature in the coming time. So it's an ongoing evolution, and it's not required any policies in that way. It's more that people learn from how they do the things and how the things are deployed, how they improve themselves, how to grow the country in a way that making things more easier for yourself. So it's more a way of thinking instead of way of implementing policies, that people learn from the mistakes and then you improve the things. And that's we have seen in the last 5 years, how the trends are changing, how the number of connectivity obviously is increasing more during this COVID time, where telecom operators is doing an extremely good job being available, installing, ensuring support to the consumer during the lockdown. But in the same time, also maintaining the network, making it stable, which is also important. People working for more, we sitting at a conference like this, ensuring enabling constant stable network. So as we see now, 5G, yes, it's been in discussion, but we see it's more as a complementary services. These two technologies go together. You need a high bandwidth backbone. You need a mobile connectivity, because making things more efficient is an important thing. And the more connected devices we're moving into, and the more connectivity we will need, mobile connectivity will need. And those two technologies are actually supplementing each other, and that's a big trend that is going into. And IoT is actually a big topic also under discussion, part of the digital society, digital communication, but it's underestimated. It's currently underestimated because the number of devices we're talking about, it's in billions. We are not talking about small devices who are just sending reports about opening doors, sending temperature. We are talking about a connected world, which makes things more efficient, but that's also connected to an environment-friendly society. So those two goes together, which is also extremely important topic. I think now, due to the COVID, there's a lot of discussion about how to improve our way of living in terms of communication and being connected. But one thing still remains in the topic, it's environment. How to improve the environment, how to make things more efficient, and maintain the environment discussion. So smart cities is a major topic still on the agenda for any country, but even in India, there have been a lot of discussion how to enable smart cities. And smart cities is all about efficiency and environment. So that's from my side. More on the topic. I think we'll get more questions during the session. But I think enabling the citizen to digital environment and making them mature is the major steps forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prajapati. We have at least one more thing in common. I've also lived and worked in Sweden. The country thrives on innovation, and for one thing, it has excellent radio engineers. So thank you very much. Can I now request Mr. Gangadhar to share his views?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Bhargava. Actually, being one of the last panelists, it's kind of hard because a lot of the good topics have been covered, very relevant topics. I really appreciate what the co-panelists have actually brought to the fore. I think if I could just take off from a few themes that have been covered already. We talked about how the traffic shift has now occurred from, say, enterprises from work to home. And there is this sudden surge of demand in home where people like us who are working from home all day, there are kids that are using online learning services from their school, getting homeworks, etc. And of course, there's the OTT you use as well, since we're all kind of huddled at home all day and night. So that in itself has changed the way I think networks are going to maybe evolve going forward. As an operator, I can certainly sympathize with what Mr. Balaji was saying earlier, is that the sudden shift in the way the bandwidth is being consumed and the SLAs that need to be provided for, it's just not providing gigabit bandwidth, but also the different SLAs for various OTT apps and maybe the kind of applications we use, including the symmetric video that we are using today. That requires a bit of rethink in terms of how networks have to be built. There's a lot of legacy that is already installed. There's still a lot of gap in how connectivity has yet to reach to the edge. There are millions that are still not connected and rely purely on wireless. Idea that there is still a lot to be done to bring the unconnected into the digital framework. And so networks will now evolve into a more of a heterogeneous mix of fixed, wireless, licensed, unlicensed, and technologies that don't require radio spectrum for that matter. So in that space, I think it is critical for operators and vendors, and Ms. Pamela brought this up quite clearly, is that rather than a very transactional approach where networks are just kind of built thinking, okay, there's 4G, there's 3G, there's 5G now. It's actually going to be very collaborative. It is actually going to be very, it's co-creation, collaboration, and partnerships that will drive the evolution. And that's because the use cases are evolving, and networks have to now adapt and adopt new capabilities very quickly. They have to be nimble, they have to be agile. And that comes from this whole virtualization framework that is being that's being evolved over the last 5, maybe 10 years. And more than ever now, that needs to take root, because what that allows operators and ISPs to do is you can now grow, scale your network very locally as well, just not over the entire network, but rather focused areas where you have the demand surge that is happening, and you invest your already finite capex that you have in a very strategic manner so that you're driving utilization. There's the other challenge where the ARPU is continuously dropping. And so now the cost per gigabit becomes a very critical element. So to enable that, you now need to bring a sort of a heterogeneous mix of virtualization platforms and radio access technologies so that they can sort of cohabitate and serve the end customer for various applications and use cases. Now, Mr. Gupta alluded to the term slicing. Well, STL, we're sort of evolving our own journey in this to meet the demands and also driving this whole Make in India approach where we have invested strategically. We have partnered with a few companies to provide this whole virtualization platform, as well as organically develop our platforms to drive the end-to-end utilization of spectrum of resources and to be able to serve various use cases and applications in a very agile and nimble manner. And some of these use cases that we talk about, whether it's enterprise networks, private networks, or this is for doing network management at the edge, near real-time, non-real-time applications, whether it is using radio resources, both for 4G and 5G dynamically. Mr. Balaji alluded to that as well. These are some of the core areas that we are focusing on as well, because we believe that this is where the networks of the future will sort of focus and will evolve to in order to serve the demands at the edge. And so I think it goes without saying that networks will the technology cycles will reduce. We will see more and more adoption at a faster rate. And what is more critical is that rather than a transactional approach, I think operators and the vendor communities will now collaborate, and we've seen that globally. When you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gangadhar. That was very topical. Could I please request Mr. Sehgal now to share his views?
Hey, thanks, Bharat. I hope I'm audible and clear, and my network connection in the house is working well.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me take the credit also on behalf of Nokia and our other telecoms product providers, because the behind the scenes work being done for the 4 customers in India, including Vodafone, Airtel, Jio and BSNL. Nokia has been there very much on the ground, and in fact we have been having our leadership call twice a week, figuring out the health of the networks, of our customer networks, and also the health of our own engineers who are there on the ground, ensuring that these networks are working fine. And because in India we've got a large workforce which does direct work for our customers, which are the 4 telcos here in India. So it's been a tremendous last 60 to 70 days now, I think post March 24th, ever since I have been also there in the house. But yes, a tremendous work being done along with our partners to ensure that the networks are up and running, and naturally, and we've all seen and we've spoken about the whole paradigm shift which we have gone through because of this. I shouldn't say the crisis, because this whole thing has actually given us a new way to approach things. It's like looking at whether the glass is half full or half empty. That's the whole approach I'll look at it. In fact, personally, since I handle the enterprise business, I look after the customers outside the 4 telcos in India, and actually work in the government space also. In my 32 years of professional career, last 60 days was the first time when we actually put in a bid. Okay, it was a few 100 crores worth of bid with a partner, in a state government scenario, wherein our engagement with the partner started on a WebEx, and our approvals happened on a WebEx, and our whole discussion with the partners on the solution happened on the WebEx. Our discussion with the customers happened on the WebEx, and we put in a bid, and the bid was submitted. So it was like it was a new normal for us, right? Because if this bid was there in a normal time, like a typical OEM, we would have been sitting at the SI place, all night trying to ensure that the bid was in place, haggling on the price, on the specification, on the compliance. But actually this worked very well, if you ask me. We devised our day into 3 parts with a partner. That morning we'll discuss this, afternoon we'll review it, and the evening we'll take a decision, what to, whether we drop it or we go forward. And it really worked wonder. So I think moving forward, this will definitely change the way we are working. I think even this exhibition or this forum which we are in, it's a very new thing for us in India. Now coming back to what are we looking forward from a typical telecom. Since I come from the enterprise space, and I would talk more from that side of it, because I think in India, we are talking, when we talk telecom, it is more from a mobile, or when we talk mobile communication, it is more from the typical mobile, communication which we have been, seeing, like for example, either voice communication or people talking on their phones or, browsing data or doing things. In my view, what at Nokia, what we have seen globally, and now we are trying to do that in India also, taking this whole mobile communication to the industry. Okay, when we talk about, and I'll just dwell more on Industry 4.0. In the last 1 year, globally, we've actually acquired about 150 customers for a private LTE. When I say private LTE, it is an LTE solution deployed in that industry spectrum from a provider or from the government, but yes, very interesting use cases like in mining, in ports, in airports, and in manufacturing. These are the four key areas where we figured out that how we can exploit the whole mobile communication network, whether it is 4G and now even with 5G. We can deliver much more beyond the operators can deliver much more beyond what they've been doing with the traditional customers like you and me, right? We are having our broadband at home, or we are having a 4G on our phone, and we are trying to, see our mails. But that whole industry thing is actually an amazing part, which, we've seen in this journey. And there's so many use cases we have delivered in the last 1.5 years, ever since we have hit the market. I'll give you some examples. Like, for example, in a mining, in one of the customers in Rio Tinto in Australia, it's an open pit mine. Imagine all the trucks, there are autonomous trucks which are running all their devices connected on a private LTE. Traditionally, it was run on a Wi-Fi, but now it's connected on private LTE. And a huge saving they found. And plus, this whole piece of mobile communication can become a one single network for the customer. He can do data, he can do voice. Traditionally, what he does is he does a network, a traditional networking. Okay, and then he does a traditional typical voice network in his own organization. In case of a 4G or a 5G, he can combine and create one autonomous network and run all these 3 services, is what our experience has been. And that's exactly what now we are trying to do in India. We are talking to customers in these particular 4 areas, in these use cases, and we've got a lot of positive feedback coming from the customer. In fact, our Chennai plant, we have got a factory in Chennai where we're making 5G equipment. We've already made about 21,000 odd radios and exported them, and that is continuing. Our whole plant in Chennai, we've actually ripped up off the Wi-Fi equipment and the 150 kilometers worth of cable, and we made it private LTE enabled. So all our robos, all our AGVs, all our machines, our AR, VR, everything is now connected on private LTE. A factory spread over about 42,000 square meters, having 2 radios and a core, and that's all working vendor. There's no wires running around, and everything is seamless. There's no disruption, and it's an Industry 4.0 actually in practice, or a practical scenario we show to our customers and to our operators, customers whom we have. So in my view, whether this pandemic would have happened or not happened, because these pandemics are not, I don't think so they can happen in a very frequent scenario. If it happens frequently, it's going to be a very different scenario. But I think moving forward, the way the government has to look at it, they have to look at the whole telecom services in a very different aspect. We are a little conservative in terms of spectrum allocations, whether comes to the operator or to people like say railways or to the industry. We have to be a little more open. Right now when we go to any industry, when we go to a refinery, the challenge which we find is that the operator is already short of spectrum. There is no spectrum available from him, and the free spectrum which is available from the government of India is a spectrum where there's no device available. It's a very bad spectrum from a device perspective, right? So government has to look at when they're looking at Industry 4.0, because I saw it in Mr. Gupta spoke about it, Pamela spoke about it. We need to see how can the government look at providing spectrum to this industry. Like, for example, I'll tell you, in US, there is a CBRS spectrum, which is used by normal citizens and by Navy also. So it's all pretty predefined. It's a good spectrum, a lot of devices available, and we have seen immense success in the energy sector and port sector using that spectrum. Like, for example, we've gone and met these airports in India, Delhi Airport, Mumbai Airport, and everybody has a challenge today. The challenge is not within the airport. Challenge is when they go out on the tarmac side. The connectivity is horrible. We all know, right? We can't be connecting each and every corner of the airport, through a commercial telecom provider network. There are going to be some black spots. So, but the challenge is, since the spectrum itself from the operator is not available in these areas because they are dense areas, the airports can't benefit from these private LTE solutions. We've done it in Finland, we've done it in Vienna, now we are doing it in Changi Airport. These private LTE solutions are finding such important use cases, and they're providing connectivity either to the IoT devices or to the like a normal push to talk communication systems. I think government needs to figure out, can we give a spectrum, a better spectrum for the Industry 4.0 to thrive. Otherwise, the dependency definitely on our service provider partners is very high. We will not be able to utilize the 5G which is going to come up maybe next. I hope it comes early. The immense advantage of 5G will not be able to derive if there is no such spectrum available for the industry per se. But yes, having said so, 5G will also give us the benefit of a large, we can splice it and we can offer it to our more customers, unlike what we can do in 4G. In my view, moving forward, maybe a year down the line, if we have to make Industry 4.0 success, private LTE needs to be, given more importance. One is giving the spectrum, or how we can better utilize the spectrum, by the service operator needs to be seen. But from an enterprise point of view, this is what we have been seeing. Mr. Gupta also touched upon FWA. That's another wonderful piece of technology, very cheap and a quick way to connect. So FTTH will definitely be there, okay, but I think the mobile technologies will have to take it beyond the FTTH part, because we can't be digging roads and taking cables to the residential areas or to the industry which are very far flung. So we need to have look at the technologies like FWA to offer these connectivity services. So this is my take. I'll not take much time. I think we got only 10 minutes left, so we'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saigal. I think given the paucity of time, I will start with what you said. Private LTE networks, clearly independent of traffic fluctuations in the wide area macro network, and very important for specific industries and IoT. So could I pose this question to Mr. Gupta, whether there is any policy that is being looked at for private LTE networks? And because this can be run both by our traditional operators as well as independent third-party operators. Over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatia. To best of my knowledge, there is no dedicated spectrum identified as a free use spectrum for 5G, either for the LT deployment in the industry areas or otherwise. This is a demand which is being talked about. The things are under consideration of the government, I am aware of, but perhaps no such decision is taken at this point of time.
I think Mr. Gupta is absolutely right, Balaji here. I think important thing is to understand, don't create arbitrage opportunities for people to have operators who pay a huge amount of money for spectrum and then carve out or balkanize networks by putting free spectrum available for LTE deployment in the private sector. I think there has to be a balance because government cannot work with creating such arbitrage opportunities. There's Wi-Fi spectrum available, huge amount of it has been given, and I believe that that's something that should be used as deployment plans for enterprises that want to take free services or free speed.
I think that addresses the first question. My next question is really, does the burden of the additional capex and opex lies squarely on the operators, or can there be a change in operating model where other players share the investments and the returns? Example, creation of a fiber core, a neutral host model where somebody deploys the last mile and other operators ride on it, or something like an OPCO-NETCO model for 5G, where you have one or two operators that deploy the equipment and other operators use it, so that everybody gets a return on the investment and the investments are shared by players in the ecosystem.
I think I can comment on that a little bit. We have seen a lot of revenue. Yes. So it's seen a little bit on the market. Also, revenue share model has been a topic to discussion, but we see this structured MSO LCO model has also been beneficial because it has enabled the reach. The big operators has not been able to reach out to small communities, to small areas, not at the speed the market needs. But of course, the availability of investment in terms of capex and opex playing a major role is very important. But we see with the demand, we see the ARPU rate is getting adjusted for sure. That is a very important factor. It has been discussed about the 4G and 5G also, to reinvest in innovation, but also to maintain the network. Also, it's an important factor to maintain and retain the ARPU levels. But reachability is the one which is an important factor today. And CapEx obviously plays a role because laying a fiber, deploying a fiber has involvement of a lot of OSP initial stage of investment. So it's an important step now that the whole ecosystem moves in together. We as a supplier, along with the operators, along with the consumers who are paying the monthly ARPU rate, also plays a role.
Just to jump in quickly, TRAI has been very forthcoming. Government has been extremely progressive. Both of them have actually made spectrum sharing, IP scope of the IP players improvement, etc. All of them have been steps that they have taken, and the industry is also kind of forming new models. Invades, fiber cores, tower cores, giving more of scope to share active infrastructure. All of that is already happening. As long as the business case is there for all the elements, all the ecosystem players, I don't see that being a problem.
Can I just pitch in for a minute? Two important issues are there. Number one is to create the optical fiber networks and fiberization as a whole. TRAI has given a recommendation to the government very recently where IP infrastructure provider has been pitched in, and they can provide the optical fiber network in the cities and other places, which can be transparently shared by all telecom service providers. So it is on the model which sharing is happening as a tower sharing. The second is TRAI has recommended the active infrastructure sharing also for telecom service providers. So therefore, IP providers can set up the network, or even service provider can set up the network, which can be shared by all the service providers. So the framework is already in place, and I don't think there will be any problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Just one more point also. I think BSNL government body has also opened up a franchise model where we see their partners, franchise partners, are doing mass deployment. And that's a big change also that is opening up the revenue sharing or investment sharing models.
Yeah, and I think one other point on that, if I may just add, see, one of the biggest challenges we have today is connectivity indoors. And if you really think about the economics of connecting, bringing networks indoor, that's always been a challenge, and that's a global problem. And so the topic of neutral host, sharing of resources, and even at towers, I mean, rural connectivity has always been a challenge. I mean, there's ownership of the infrastructure, driving it, getting ROIs has always been a challenge, and that's why DAS never took off. So what we believe is having a network infrastructure capability, a platform that can host multiple carriers, multiple operators in the same infrastructure, driving the common connectivity platform. That to us is the sort of the answer, and you make the enterprise the owner to some extent. I know Mr. Balaji alluded to the challenges with that, but I think there are models globally. If you take the US as an example, Germany as an example, private enterprise solutions can in and of itself be a segment by itself. And while there is this
Germany, Rajesh, the auto sector in Germany, Rajesh pays a lot of money for the spectrum. Just thought I'd clarify.
I absolutely agree. So the monetization of the spectrum is one aspect of it, but what I was going to is enablement of the true promise of 5G. I mean, automation. If you really want to bring that to reality, you need to allow very specific utilization of the spectrum for use cases. So that comes from the ability for these enterprises to sort of manage some of that capabilities and drive customization. Who provides the end-to-end infrastructure? Yes, that's an open question. So I just thought I'd add there.
Great. Thanks very much. So in the interest of time, I will address two issues. One is for everybody to think of, and the other is a general comment before I close. So all of us agree that telecom, and particularly if 5G, is a horizontal play. It touches multiple industries and the consumer, but are the other industries ready? The regulations within the other industries ready? Because anybody who will invest in 5G, and I speak about the operators to make the case, unless there is an ROI, I'm not sure how much real interest there will be. Of course, I don't speak on behalf of any of the other operators, but the ecosystem needs to be ready for investments to be made. The other question was, are we going to see release 15 or release 16? Which I'm aware it's going to be a combination of release 15 and 16. So again, I'm taking the liberty of having worked at an operator, so addressing that question. Finally, I think the time's over. I'd like to thank the panelists for their deep insights. I hope the audience enjoyed the session as much as we did. I certainly did. And I believe I say this on behalf of all of us in the industry, that we are going to come out of this stronger than ever before. Thank you very much. And if there are any last comments, we can take them here.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Just one comment there. The question you made about the vertical industries. I don't know, there's some echo on my side.
Ma'am, we'll all go on mute.
Yeah, the vertical industries, I think that requires interministerial collaboration. We have started one between DOT and Ministry of Finance to do the use case labs for technology, 5G in the finance sector. Okay, similarly, we need to do these use case labs with other ministries. And that's where, government really needs to be an enabler and a facilitator to collaborate across ministries. That's very, very critical.
Ma'am, that's one of the nicest things that one's heard. And I think that will certainly help the entire ecosystem and the players representing their various industries and companies. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Convergence India Group. So we thank you all the speakers and attendees today for joining in for the webinar. So hope to see you soon in some of the other webinar in the future. Till then, take care, stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.